Hey, Dustin, how do we stay positive with all this change and upheaval that we see in sales all the time? Have you ever had an issue with that?
Yeah, hey, good morning, Brian. It's definitely tough. I mean, I try to stay as even keeled as possible. Don't get too high, don't get too low. You never want that slump or those bad days to turn into a bad year. But the reality is sometimes things are going to happen, right? You're going to lose a deal, the economy is going to tank. There's people getting laid off left and right now. And I think you just have to kind of control what you can control, kind of be grateful for what you have. Those are just some kind of overarching things that I try to do to stay positive when you have all this craziness going on sometimes.
Yeah, and I think people misinterpret positive, negative, because it's a feeling, right? It's not a logical analysis. So I think if people don't feel positive, they don't think things are going well. And I think people think that what the world's like today is the way the world's going to be forever. And I've been through a couple of these enormous waves, and they're hard. But what you got to do is control your thoughts. Understand that, okay, that's a feeling. Is it legitimate? What can I do to maintain it? And what I always asked people is like, what is your judgment on this? Are you typically too positive or too negative, and you just need to even it out? Because there's the state management of your feelings, positive and negative, but there's also how accurate is your reading of the situation. Because let's say you get laid off, it's typically panic, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah, yeah, just yeah, for sure.
yeah, because
No,
fight or flight freeze, and it's flight usually. At that point you're like, I'm going to go live in a cabin, or what do they call monk mode today? That's when you get super focused, I guess. But
yeah,
I
but
think
no, I mean, I've had a layoff somewhat recently for me, so it's not it's
it's
not a good
not a
feeling.
foreign concept.
Yeah, it's not I mean, it's shocking. It's especially if you've had quite a bit of success in your career. It's like kind of came out of left field a little bit for me, but yeah, I mean, I was, angry, I was pissed, I was, my emotions kind of went crazy. But you got to give yourself a little bit of time on something like that. You got to give yourself a day or two to kind of regroup. But then after that, I kind of took it as like kind of like a chip on my shoulder type thing, right? So I ended up, starting my own business with a good friend, and it's like I think the best. I don't want to be bitter and like have revenge, but I think the best revenge is like having a lot of success with something else you do. So I just kind of looked at it like that. But at first I had a lot of negative feelings and feedback, but then I kind of turned it into like, what can I use that to fuel me to another path that maybe I was meant to go to anyway. So
Yeah, and that's it. Turn it into fuel instead of fury, because you,
exactly.
you get nothing for burning a bridge. Because you never know when you might need that bridge, or that bridge is quarried, or somebody's asking about what happened, and it's like, it's fine. Stuff happens. People overhire. The market goes a little south, doesn't develop fast enough, and company needs to make changes. That sometimes they overreact and they cut good people, and that's okay. It's like, time to move on. And
No, you're right. And burning bridges too. Yeah, that made me think of another situation where the first company I worked for almost 9 years, there was my first kind of mentor, and he was a wrestler in college. He was just kind of a pain in the ass basically, but he would be up at 4 a.m. like he'd be like making me do all this crazy stuff when I was like an assistant, territory rep. And I mean, there was times where I was not real happy with him, but then we ended up becoming good friends. And then 10 years later, he was working at Stryker in a whole other industry. He got me an interview, and next thing you know, I was working at Stryker, which is not an easy place to get into. So yeah, don't burn bridges when bad stuff happens or you get mad at people. Like just take the high path for sure. Yep.
yeah, and that happens. And I think a lot of people get stuck getting negative, because negative makes you feel a little bit better, pointing out what's wrong with everybody else. And it's just, And that delusion, I think, is the main problem that people have, not just salespeople, it's everybody. That protection, rationalization that we give every explanation in our lives, whether we lose a deal, territory changes, someone else does better than us at the company. And instead of trying to either learn for it and understand it and, try and analyze it and build from it, we explain it away. And with those explanations, we feel better, but we're telling ourselves lies.
Yeah, and if you're hanging around with those same type of reps that are blaming everybody else too, you're just going to get sucked down to that path even more. And so you have like that rule of five, like the five people you hang out with the most is kind of who you are. But it's the same thing with work. Like if you look at who are you talking to the most and hanging out with the most, if it's all those negative people that are blaming the company or the customers or whatever, then that's not good either. So you have to make sure. I think another thing that helps to stay positive is to surround yourself with people that are like that in your company or in life in general, honestly. But
Yeah, because you want to read the situation accurately, not just defend yourself, but to kind of move forward logically and instead of just following your emotions. I think the water cooler crowd is the most dangerous thing. The C players who have an explanation for everything. Every time I hear them, the story's always the same. It's the territory, the product, the economy, the comp plan, my manager. And there's a little bit of truth to all of that. But that doesn't help you. You may be right, but do you want to be right or do you want to be rich? I used to tell my inside manager that. He would argue with me and all these things. And I'd be like, Mario, do you want to be right or do you want to be rich? He goes, I want to be rich. Okay, then please do what I tell you because I want you to be rich.
I love that. Yeah, I know I mean, it's easy to fall into blaming everybody else, but I think, if the economy tanks or you get laid off, I mean, you almost have to like have a higher sense of urgency, right? So, I mean, if you're going to get out of that hole, you're going to have to dig yourself out and no one's going to be there to save you type thing. So I mean, you have to turn it up even more. So you can't feel sorry for yourself and you have to kind of just take it up a notch, be more creative, do stuff outside of the box, like reach into those people that you met years ago that may be willing to help you. But I mean, instead of pointing fingers, you need to like do the opposite and actually like turn it up a couple gears and like get your stuff in shape. I think at least. So
Well, it's up to you, right? The idea of sitting around waiting for someone to rescue you is not a good strategy. Waiting for the market to turn around, not a good strategy. Waiting for the leads, not a good strategy. Yeah, should you get leads? Of course you should. But if you don't, what do? You got to go make them. And people forget why they hire salespeople. It's not to take orders. They don't need to hire people for taking orders. They can pay someone 30, 40, 50K a year to do that. They pay commission and hire salespeople to go make things happen, things that would not happen otherwise. And a lot of us think that, oh, if they hire us, there must be demand for us. No, it's kind of, we got to go create that demand.
yeah, no, I mean, you have to have that hunter mentality, especially with commission sales. So, and I think it's easy to fall into that if you get some bigger customers and they're just kind of, you're getting those orders more easily than you did in the past. It's one thing if you build up that customer yourself, but a lot of times you just come into it and you're just getting those orders and then you get used to it and you think it's way easier than it actually is. And then you go to somewhere else where you're just completely trying to find new business. Cause I've experienced that. And I was like, man, maybe I wasn't as good as I thought when I was doing some of those roles because it was like, boom, you just stuff can start flowing. But then when you're just completely hunting and trying to find stuff, I mean, you definitely have to stay positive in that type of role because otherwise you're never going to get anything done.
Yeah, because I've been at startups where they hire, someone who was super successful at a big brand company, had done huge deals. And I've interviewed them and I see them and I'm like, could they do a huge deal without that brand behind them? They think they can. I don't know if they can. And all of a sudden they go to either starting their own company because they think they have some secret, and they probably did a great job. I have no doubt. Nobody closes a huge deal like that without some talent. You don't take a 7-figure deal as an order. You have to go create it. But you had a lot of help. Especially if you're the market leader, they're most likely going to pick you. You're kind of a lead then. How much money you get out of them, okay, you can be a good negotiator, or you could pull in your CEO, your regional manager, whoever, who might be a great negotiator, and they get the big price, but you get credit for the deal. And I think a lot of people who, like the bat boy at the Yankees thinks he's the best bat boy in the league. But is he really any good than the bat boy for the Pirates?
It's a great point. It's a great point. I've had some like powerful brands behind me in the past and great products. And I mean, you really can milk that and rely on that and those relationships. I mean, like, so when I was with Milwaukee Tool, I mean, it took them like over a decade to kind of build what they did with Home Depot, just because it's such a massive customer. But I mean, it's so hard to break into places like that. But it literally took like 10 years of like the CEO and all these like high up people doing all kind of stuff to get it there. And I kind of got the tail end when it was already a lot of momentum. But I went and ran with it and still overperformed. And you have to have some talent to do some of that stuff. But if all that stuff that happened before my time, like you can't really account for that. So there's definitely a big difference. And I didn't realize that as much, or I was probably a little too overconfident. And then when I went to new industries, I'd say humbled a little bit, and I knew I had to but it stretched me. That's another thing too, is like, I think, you can sit around and feel sorry for yourself, like this whole negative conversation, or you can kind of do something about it and like, get out of your comfort zone and like make some things happen and try, go to a new company or do a new industry, a new role that kind of challenges you. So I think that can help too, to kind of keep your mindset positive. So.
And also you should take some self-reflection time and ask yourself, am I typically a little negative or a little positive? Because nobody ever reads a situation perfectly. Even if you look at your forecast, it's like, well, do you think this deal will close? Everyone thinks it will. It's on the forecast. When do you think it'll close? How much do you think it'll close for? Write that down. And then when it closes or it doesn't close, say, well, why was I wrong? Was I too optimistic? Did I not do all the work? Did I not cover the bases? Or was I too pessimistic? And a lot of people want to be purely positive, but a little pessimism at the right time is okay. Gets you thinking, gets you a little uncomfortable, not being depressed, but just a little, what could go wrong here? Worth the conversation.
It's a great point. And I think most people are probably too positive when they're looking at their pipeline,
Right.
whether they're making it up for their boss or the company. I guess that's a whole nother conversation, but yeah, most people are probably too positive with their pipeline, where they actually need to have a little more pessimism and like, pick holes in it and whatnot. So that's an interesting comment. And yeah, I remember one time when I was in healthcare doing medical device, it's just healthcare. There's so much going on. There's a lot of negative stuff going on, and it's easy to get sucked into that trap. And one of my good friends was kind of like, man, you got to watch it, dude. You're like blaming people for all this stuff. You're blaming your territory. So if you have good friends, hopefully they'll call you out on it, or good people at work. But yeah, it is good to get that check in from people or yourself as well. So
Yeah. And just ask your friends, hey, if you were to judge me optimistic or pessimistic, which one would you pick? And if they say, oh, no, you're nice and even keeled. And it's like, that's when they're lying. Because everyone's a little optimistic or pessimistic, and a little on one side or the other is okay. It's like, and ask yourself, which is serving me? Because when you look at the forecast, being optimistic is serving you, because you hear people all the time, I got a great pipeline. And it's like, I don't know what that means, right? That means you're hoping that everything's going to be okay because you got all this stuff in the future. And I bet you it's probably 2 or 3 times what the deals really is. Like marketing is optimistic about pipeline, right? They use words like demand and buyers. And it's like, I love listening to marketing podcasts because I hear the differences between marketing and sales. They call it demand. Has anyone ever demanded buying your product?
I wish, but I don't think so.
I've never had anyone demand. At best, you've got interest. Yeah, we'd like to see a demo. Is that demand? Right? Are these buyers? No, they're prospects, they're suspects, they're contacts. Why do they use those words? It serves them, right? Why are managers pulling apart the forecast? Because they want you to see the possibilities of what could go wrong. You know, who else are you talking to with that account? Oh no, this is the guy. He's the guy. He can do it. He gets these things done. And then all of a sudden the end of the quarter comes and it's like, well, he said it was in procurement, but it's not in procurement. He thinks it is. You hope it is, but that's what serves you.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. That's the time where you really have to kind of dig deeper and be pessimistic. So like if you think you're going to have objections or you think something could go wrong, like kind of visualizing that, practicing it, if you have to do role play, whatever it is, but visualizing those bigger meetings or opportunities and the steps you have to do to get there and what you think the pushback will be and kind of speaking that out loud or mapping it in your head, whatever it is, that's important too. So yeah, it's a great perspective because I guess I try to stay positive, but there's times where you need to have strategic pessimism, I guess, in sales for sure.
Well, certainly with
So
deals, because if you're trying to live off a pipeline and stuff isn't moving forward or isn't closing, is it pipeline or is it pipe dream? And are you doing that just to feel better about it? And I've seen people talk themselves out of deals. And it's good to be analytical about that. Even I had a manager who was super paranoid. I could have the order in my hand and he'd be like, I don't know if we can book this. It never said a good thing about a deal, but it pushes you, it gets you thinking. And I started saying, well, what's he going to say? And I started preparing for it. And he thought everyone was against him. We come out of a presentation and he goes, that guy's going to kill us. He's not going to go with us. He was just really paranoid, but it worked for him. And I guess that you got to find what works for you. And by being able to document your judgment and then test it against what happens in reality, it's a great way to develop your judgment. Because what's judgment is you looking out at the world and having a decent assessment of what I should do in what order and what way. And I think a lot of us just, I'm busy, I'm happy.
Yeah, no, I learned it the hard way. At some points, it's like, in sales, nothing really matters until you get the PO or they ship the product, whatever type of industry you're in. And then there's a lot of times where you would count that deal as one when they haven't done that final couple steps, which usually is the hardest one. So there's many times over the years where I would think everything was a done deal, but they actually didn't sign the PO or they didn't issue the PO, or they didn't ship the product, the physical goods. Like nothing matters until that happens. So I do kind of like your old manager kind of beating people up on that because that's true. Because I and you don't want to like ruin people when they feel good about some deal that they think they just closed, but we're like, so you have all those steps done, like you have the implementation date set up, like they ship the product, like because there's a lot of steps that go into it, and then sometimes people have like a blank stare when you ask them that. But yeah, don't count it until you actually see the product in person or the PO gets signed or whatever. So
yeah, because certainly when you're working on a deal, we fall into these traps. We believe what we hear, but the client is telling you what they want you to hear, what serves them. Are they lying? Well, it's not really a lie. They're just being optimistic. They say, oh, how do we compare against the other alternatives? Oh, you're so great. You guys got it. It's nailed. It's definitely going to happen. Just send me a proposal. Can you give me 10 points off of that? We'll get it done real quick. And they have no idea how to get it done. And if you ever go into a presentation, you ask, who's the decision maker? Everyone would raise their hand. You didn't ask what decision. They all have an opinion. That's their decision. What we think of as a decision is, are you going to buy? Yes or no? When are you going to buy? Yes or no? When? And how soon can I get it?
Yeah, in those cases, it's almost better if that customer gives you the bad news early, so you're not wasting your time for months afterwards. But then I think people, to your point, they want to stay positive, or they want to like keep you on the hook, I guess, or they just don't want to give you bad news, so they just keep it going. And then in that case, it'd actually be better to get that bad news and have okay, all right, I just lost this big deal, but at least you're not wasting your time the next 3 or 6 months to try to get it. You actually know kind of where you stand. But customers have the same thing, where they don't probably want to give you the bad news, or they want to stay positive just because they're being nice or whatever. So that can hurt as well. So
yeah, they may be optimistic. They may not, or they may assume that it's really easy to get done, but nothing's ever easy to get done at a big company, especially when you're trying to spend the company's money. They've got all these systems, all these people to make sure you can't spend the company's money. But they have a problem, you have a solution, they like it, so you assume it's going to get bought. That's just when the selling begins. Everyone thinks that's when you get the deal. It's like, no, it's like when 80% doesn't close, there's an issue. And people say, oh, well, they don't have budget, or all these excuses come up, which are false beliefs that you now put into your judgment as wrong. And now that's how you look at the world. How many times do you hear, oh, the budget? And it's like, okay, you're telling me they don't have money or access to money. Well, it's not in the right place at the right time. And it's like, okay, you believe that. It's like people saying they're busy. You know, if you're dating somebody and they say they're busy, what does that tell you?
they don't want to hang out. They're not interested.
They're not interested in you.
Yep.
We know it in that context, right?
Yep.
But
no, that's where it hurts people. You're trying to stay optimistic, but it can hurt you too. So it's an interesting topic. But I think in general, it's like just, you're gonna have some ups and downs. You just got to try to stay positive even when things are going tough. And if you have that mentality, I feel like it just helps things flow better in sales, because you're going to lose a deal, you're going to get potentially laid off, you're going to have to change companies, you're going to have some tough times. So you just have to kind of have that mentality to power through it. So a lot of stuff we talked about, I think, definitely helps your mindset staying positive.
Yeah, and I think if you reframe it from positive to resourceful, where you can apply yourself in an appropriate way given the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, positive is a big part of that. That's fine. But I think if you're not resourceful, what's going to happen? Nobody's driving by your house, knocking on the door with a job offer, right? That doesn't happen. You have to go out and get it, or at least call headhunters to help them get it for you. And it really goes back to the salespreneur thing, where if you're not thinking like an entrepreneur who happens to work at a company, then you're just an employee. And no sales manager goes, get me some employees. No, they're like, get me some killers is what they always ask for. No one says, do you have a good C player sitting on the bench right now? No one says that.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. You're going to have blind spots if you're too positive. So I like being resourceful. And at the end of the day, you're going to have to do it yourself. No one's going to come save you. You got to put in the work. You got to go find that new job. You got to do all the steps to close that big deal. So that's part of it too. You got to be realistic and resourceful, with the positive tone, I guess. So